Hello and happy Mother's Day. Welcome to Lean and Clean with Fitness Chef Christine. I am Christine, your host, and today my shirt says change starts on the inside. So what we think, we become, and what we put in makes all the difference in the world. So since it's Mother's Day, I am invited to some friend's house and they asked me to bring bread. So I'm gonna bring some challah bread and I'm gonna bring some sourdough bread. Now the sourdough bread, I'm just gonna show you how to score and bake it because I did a previous segment on that, so you can look that up. But today we're gonna mix some challah bread. If you've never had it, it's slightly sweet, it's egg enriched, so it's got a good amount of protein to it. It's soft and delicious, so let's make it. We're gonna need 1 cup of warm water, about room temperature is good. And if you can, use bottled water. If not, tap water is just fine. And to that, we're gonna add 1 packet of yeast. This will make 1 big loaf or 2 small loaves. So 1 of these packets, this is a dry active yeast. So we're just gonna snip that open and pour that in. And then we're gonna add 1/3 cup of sugar. I am using a pure cane sugar. You can use what you like. I do not recommend using a sugar substitute though. If you think about it, this comes up with about 20 or 30 slices of bread. So you're not getting a whole lot of sugar. It's worth it to use the real thing on this one. Sometimes I say you can use a substitute, but this one I don't think so. If you have to, you could use raw honey, but it does change the texture quite a bit. Okay, so we're gonna let that sit for a second and do its thing. And in the meantime, we're going to get all the rest of our stuff. So we're gonna need a 4.5 cups of flour. So we'll go ahead and put that right on top. We'll just let that sit there and do its thing. It's dry active yeast. You could also use instant yeast just fine. You'll see I have a big bucket of flour. I will show you. 1 giant bucket of flour. See if you can see it here. There we go. Big bucket of flour. It's got 50 pounds of flour in it. So I do a lot of baking. So of course, it's handy to have a lot of flour on hand. This is Sir Lancelot high gluten flour. So it has a nice rise to it. And because it has such a slow rise to it, it's going to really break it down nicely. So it's not a very quick bread. I made dough earlier so I can show you what it looks like, but it does in fact take quite a while to do its thing. Okay, to that we're going to add 2 eggs and 1 egg yolk. This is what I'm talking about when I say it's enriched. We're just gonna make a little well in the center. Think about like when you make pasta, how you do that. So we're gonna make that little well in there. And we're gonna crack in 2 eggs and 1 egg yolk. Now, a better way to do it is actually to crack it into a container first. Make sure you don't have any shells. So we'll go ahead and do that. And this way you can easily save the egg white as well. All right, so we're gonna go ahead and take out just that yolk because we don't need that egg white for this one. And we'll save that for another use. I'm gonna move that to the side. Rinse that in there. And then we're gonna add a 1/4 cup of neutral flavored oil. So I am using avocado oil, pure avocado oil. When I owned the bakery, we used vegetable oil. But I was not really into nutrition at that point. We were all about the flavor. So you can make that choice for yourself. Vegetable oil is not the very best for you, and avocado oil works fantastic. But obviously if you have an avocado allergy, stay away from it. Olive oil makes it taste great as well. You have that little tiny olive oil flavor, which I love. And so if that bothers you, go ahead and use more neutral oil. But for me, that is just fine. And then we're gonna add a 1.5 teaspoons of salt. Let's see if I can find a teaspoon. You're just gonna have to trust me. 1 teaspoon and 1/2. 20 years of owning a bakery, I got that down pat. Okay, we're gonna go ahead and start to mix that in. So we're just gonna start by breaking up those eggs. Just circle around. All this time our yeast has been doing its thing down underneath that flour. Just starting to get nice and active. And we're just gonna take our fingers and just go around and around. And then start to squeeze your dough. Around, squeeze, around, squeeze. Use the heel of your hand to press while you squeeze, picking up that extra flour as you go. And before you know it, you will have a nice ball of dough. I like keeping it in a really big bowl. It adds less mess to clean up at the end. And if you find that you're not picking up, you have a lot of excess flour there, then you could add just a little bit more water. So we're gonna go ahead and get a little tiny bit more water. And you're gonna wanna add it just a tablespoon at a time. So we're just gonna pick up a little bit of that extra flour off the bottom. I don't want wet dough. I just want it to be homogeneous so that I can pick up all the flour at the bottom. And then we're gonna go ahead and knead it. So you're gonna push through the heel of your hand, turn the bowl, push, turn, push, turn and push, until it starts to look a little bit smoother. At this point, you've got a nice rough ball. Right, here we go, nice rough ball. We're gonna go ahead and cover this bowl and let it rise for about an hour and a half, 2 hours, until it's real nice and puffy. And in between that time, so about halfway through, I'm gonna come through and deflate the dough, give it a couple of turns. I'll show you what that looks like. And then we're gonna go ahead and keep it rising and form our loaf. All right, let's find us some plastic wrap over here. Now maybe you don't have as big a bowl, no worries. Get the biggest bowl that you have. We'll let that do its thing over here. And I'm gonna show you what the dough looks like after it's been rising. Because I made some early this morning before I went to church and let it rise. So let's clean up our area here for a second and I'll come back and show you. We're gonna uncover the dough that I made this morning before I went to church. So it rose for 2 hours. You can see how it got nice and puffy here. We're gonna go ahead and just flip that out. And I'm gonna use a bench knife. If you don't have one, you can simply use a regular knife, no problem. And I'm just gonna divide that dough into 2 pieces. Okay, so there we go, got 2 nice pieces here. And then I'm gonna divide each of these doughs into 3 parts. So I'm gonna round it off again because visually it's much easier to divide that way. So I'm just gonna come in here, divide into 3, fairly equal pieces. And then we'll take each of those pieces on a nice clean surface and we're just gonna roll them lengthwise. So we're just gonna get a nice roll here. And I'm not gonna stretch it out too much because we're gonna go ahead and roll it again. So we're just gonna try and get your pre-shaping done. So we're just gonna go ahead and lightly roll. And these are just gonna be smaller loaves. I'm gonna do one that's a 3 braid and one that's a 4 braid. So I can show you both because you never know what you wanna make. All right, so let me grab our pan. It's always good to have your pan ready to go. So I put some parchment paper on here. I'm gonna sprinkle just a light dusting of flour across the top here. So just get a little tiny bit there so it doesn't stick like crazy once your loaf is ready to rock and roll. And then we're gonna just sprinkle a tiny bit of flour on here, just a little zhuzh, and roll again till you get the length that you want. We're not looking for a loaf that's super fat, so you wanna have them fairly long, about, I don't know, maybe about 12 inches long, each of them. And then we're just gonna do a regular braid. Okay, let's move this down so you can see it a little bit better here. Boom, oops, sorry about that. All right, so you're gonna start with your seam at the top. So you're just gonna stick them together. And then you're gonna go middle, over, under. Middle, over, under, just like you're braiding hair. If you've ever braided hair, you'll know that it's just over, under. Okay, so there is our loaf there. Pretty, huh? Okay, so we're gonna go ahead and put that on our pan. And we'll move that aside. And a lot of moving parts here. So we're gonna push that here. And then we're gonna let that rise. And once that's fully risen, you might have to tuck that under a little further. Once that's fully risen, then we'll give it a good egg wash and we'll pop it into the oven and let it do its thing. But in the meantime, we're gonna do a 4 braid. So the easiest way to do this is to flatten out your bread dough and get it into a nice rectangle. So just go ahead and press it down. If you get any puffy ball, little puff balls, just tap them out. And we're gonna divide that and divide that again into 4 equal pieces, or relatively. Now you could scale it if you want to be perfect. You can scale the pieces and get them the exact same weight, but truthfully, I don't think it's worth the extra work. I think if you're just making them for yourselves and your family, it's not necessary. When we own the bakery, we scale stuff because we want it to come out uniform, everybody the same. But for our purposes in our house, I don't really worry about that. Alrighty, similar start. We're just gonna seam them all together. Seam them together. And now there's many different ways you can do this, lots of different ways, but we'll start with the simplest way to do it. So we mush them together so they're nice and tight. And then we're gonna take this first one, we're gonna go under, over, under. Push it together. We take this next one, we go under, over, under. Ready? Under, over, under. Under, over, under. Under, over, under. And then we've got these straggly pieces. So we do the same thing. Go under, over, and we don't really have a lot to go under, so we're just gonna pull that piece right there, and then we're just gonna roll it together to seam them all together, and then just pinch the ends so that it's nice and tight. And there you have a really beautiful braid. Now, let's say that you wanted this one to be round and not long. At that point, you can go ahead and roll it, so tuck it under. Just gonna roll, 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 and then seam it together. And there you have a round loaf. So I'll bring that in close for you, so we'll bake that one as a round loaf. Real pretty, huh? Okay. So then we're just gonna tuck that over here. And we're gonna cover that up with some plastic wrap. Again, you wanna really make sure that your braid is nice and tight so that it doesn't release once it starts popping up. We're gonna get some plastic wrap over here. Now, because the dough has a bit of oil, it does not like to stick together all that well. So don't worry about mushing it down. It will separate as it starts to rise and as it starts to bake. So give it a nice, firm rolly. That's a very technical term, rolly. All right, we're gonna set this aside and let them rise. I'll be back. As promised, we're going to, while that's rising, we're gonna work on our sourdough bread. This dough has been rising in my refrigerator overnight, but it was also rising on the bench for 12 hours. So you can watch one of the videos on sourdough and find out how we mix the dough, but today we're just talking about what we do after we mix the dough. Okay, I lined up a piece of upside down pan with parchment paper. The reason I do this is because I want to cover it with a metal bowl, and the sides would prevent the metal bowl from sticking to the bottom. So if you do it upside down, you have no problem with that. So we're gonna give it a little zhuzh of flour so our loaf doesn't stick to the parchment paper. And then you'll notice that the Benetton I use, I line with plastic wrap. I know that's unusual, but it saves me from having to clean them all the time, and I like that it still shows the basket lining. So I'm just gonna invert that, pull it up, and then I've got my shaker of flour. I'm just gonna give it a light dusting of flour. Now you can use a razor blade attached to a lamp. So you can use a razor blade, make your cuts that way. But I'm just gonna show you, a lot of people don't have them, right? So a serrated knife will work very well. You have to have a nice sharp serrated knife. But we're just gonna come in here and we're just gonna go in a kind of an arc. We're gonna come in and around. Now the thing about a serrated knife is it's gonna pull a little bit. So you might have to come back and so, and just do like that. Now, if you want to get more creative and you want, fancy, then it's worth it to invest in a lamb. So here we're just going to make some little cuts, just like wheat. Just come up, and we'll make some on this side and over here, just for decorative purposes. It may not come out perfect, but it doesn't matter. We're just looking to make something pretty to take with us. Now remember, I just took this dough out of the refrigerator, so the dough is cold. So we're gonna give it a nice steamy time by covering it up in the oven. It's gonna go in a 450-degree preheated oven for 20 minutes. Then I'm gonna uncover it and bake it for another 20 to 30 minutes. I test it by looking at the color. I like a really dark colored crust. Blonde crusts just don't have a lot of flavor, and they get softer and softer as the time goes on. I want it to be nice and crunchy and crispy and beautiful. So we're gonna get this in there for 20 minutes. The internal temperature should be roughly about 210 degrees when it's ready to rock and roll. Okay, so let's pop it in there. The internal temperature of the finished dough, that is. So 210, roughly, Fahrenheit finished dough. So that's how I know that my loaf inside is looking good. So you don't have to cut it open and check it. You'll know that it's done. All right, so we're gonna let that do its thing for 20 minutes. We're gonna let our loaves rise for the rest of the time, and I'll come back and show you. Okay, so it's been 20 minutes and we're gonna go ahead and take the lid off of the bread and we're gonna turn it. We'll just take the parchment paper and turn the loaf and then we'll put it back in for another 20 minutes. All right, I'm back. Our breads are nice and puffy and they're about 3/4 of the way where we want them to be. I have 1 egg with a tablespoon of water. I'm gonna go ahead and whisk that together with our fork. And just break that off and make sure that it's nice. I don't want any white showing up by itself. I'm gonna brush these loaves with it and let it continue to rise uncovered. I'm just gonna paint that egg wash on there. If you don't like them quite as dark, you can keep the yolk out and just use the egg white that we had left over. But I really like the color with the egg yolk. So you choose what you like. I prefer a darker loaf to a lighter loaf, so that is what I'm gonna do. At this point, if you wanted to add some sesame seeds, it would be a good time to do that. So maybe we'll do that with 1 loaf and keep the other, or poppy seeds, whatever you like. See if I can find some sesame seeds for these, and we'll do that. We'll do 1 plain and 1 with sesame. All right, gotta get all the little nooks and crannies in there. We got all our parts. There we go. Here, there we go. Let's see if I can find some sesame seeds and we'll do it. I got some toasted sesame seeds. I really like toasted sesame seeds, so if you can't purchase toasted sesame seeds, just put them in a warm pan and let them just warm up a little bit. It will really help. Even though they're gonna bake in the oven, the pre-toasted ones are always better. I'm just gonna put some in my hand because when you try to sprinkle it on, they never really go on right. So we're just gonna come around. And I'm not gonna do tons of them, but I'm gonna do a nice amount of, a little goes a long way with the toasted one, so. Just go ahead and stick it on there. Nicey nice, perfect. We're gonna let them rise a little bit longer. I've got about 20 more minutes on the other bread, so we'll let these rise and then we'll show you everything. Let's take a look at the dough that we originally made. So it's been a little over an hour and you can see that it's just beautiful. So you can go ahead and knead it right in the pan, or we can take it out and knead it on the counter. I'm just gonna go ahead and knead it in the pan because we don't need a lot of kneading for this. It's already nice and smooth just from the time that we've left it. I'm gonna give it a little smack on the pan and turn it, smack on the pan and turn it. That's gonna help really even things out. And at that point, I can just pick it up and finish doing what I need to do. I'm just gonna round it up into a ball and we're just gonna let it rise again. There we go. And we'll cover it back up. My kitchen is extremely warm right now. It's very warm outside. It's in the mid 80s and I've had the oven going for about 4 hours, so it is nice and toasty in here. So that means our dough is gonna rise faster than it would in a cooler location. So these are things you have to keep in mind when you're making your own bread. But let me tell you, the health benefits of making your own bread are so, so worth it. Not to mention the flavor is absolutely amazing and it makes your house smell fantastic. So do it. The hollow loaves are going in. I've dropped the temperature to 375. It's coming down and we'll start that. And let me show you what our sourdough loaf looks like. So this is the one that we did. See here. And then this is one I did earlier. So it's a little bit lighter, but I really like the dark crust. I think that adds a lot of flavor and complexity. So here are our beautiful loaves. This is our 3 braid right here. And this was our 4 braid that we went ahead and put into a round. We're just gonna temp it out, make sure we're where we need to be. We are good there. And we are good there as well. So we are good to go. Let me show you the way that I slice bread. So when I owned a bakery, I had a commercial bread slicer, but I don't have room for that in my house and no need for it really. So I bought a bread slicer, a deli slicer, off of Amazon. I'll put the link in the show notes. It's well worth it. It's $40, I think. Maybe. All right, so maybe I'm wrong. It might be a little more. So the first slice here. but you can see you get a really nice slice. You can choose the thickness that you like. Then they all come out uniform. It's still a tiny bit warm, so I probably should have let it cool a bit. But then they come out nice and uniform, and do not put them in a plastic Ziploc bag because they will just mold immediately. Better way to do it is to wrap them in some beeswax paper, or even put them loosely into polyfilm or saran wrap, and so it has a little bit of room to breathe. It doesn't create too much sweat, and then they'll be good to go. If you have a lot of bread, you can freeze it and take it out as you need it. That works perfectly well as well. Last thing is, if it starts to get stale and you have not sliced it, then you can run it under water and pop it back in your oven at 450 degrees, and it will be just like new. I hope you found these tips helpful. Let me show you one more time our breads. And if you have enjoyed this episode, I hope that you will leave a review and give us a thumbs up and 5 stars and all the things. Make sure you subscribe, all that good stuff, because that always helps us share. Sharing helps a lot too. So there's our challah loaves, nice and pretty. And again, like I said, if you don't like them as dark, you can just use an egg whitewash instead of an egg wash, and that will lighten up the color. But I particularly love that dark color. All right, my friends, I wish you all a very happy Mother's Day. As I said, many blessings to each of you. You're always in my prayers. Thank you for watching. Mwah. Happy cooking.